Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Yes, sir.
Author Cal Newport. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Not just an author, also a professor,
Yes.
teacher at Georgetown University.
But he wrote this book. It's called Digital Minimalism, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. I know you've heard me talk about this book. I love this book. I've read it twice.
He just threw down his phone, as a matter of fact, on the table.
Because,
Said that.
because of Cal, I have learned how to be a part of the attention resistance.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Explain what the attention resistance is.
Well, I mean, it's a group of people who have realized the degree to which these really large attention conglomerates are engineering their products to try to get you looking at this thing a lot more than you need to, or a lot more than you know is healthy. So there's a group of people out there that say, yeah, enough of that. Like, how can I go in? How can I get the value out of the internet? How can I get the value out of my phone without looking at it 150 times a day?
Yeah, it's so many different things to talk about. One of the first things you break down in the book is what a Silicon Valley whistleblower said about social media addiction and compared it to a whistleblower in the tobacco industry. Can you explain a little bit of that?
Yeah, well, this is what's interesting about smartphones and social media. I mean, we think that looking at the phone all the time is fundamental to the technology. Like, that's the way you're supposed to use it. It's not the way we used to use it. It's not the way we used iPhones when they first came out. It's not the way we used social media when it first came out.
It was to make phone calls and listen to music.
Make phone calls, listen to music, and social media. You would post something and maybe come back later that week and see if someone else had posted something. Then they re-engineered the experience so that it would be all about social approval indicators coming to you all day long, right? So every time you hit on the app, am I getting a like? The like button wasn't there in the early days. So I have favorites. Am I getting tagged in photos? That was on purpose because they realized if they could have something you could see about yourself every time you hit the app on your phone, you'd get a slot machine effect.
And people get devastated when they post a picture and they don't get enough likes. And they're like, oh, my God, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. And Tristan Harris, this whistleblower from Google, he claims that Instagram was even artificially holding back the favorites on the photos because they had studied the reinforcement schedules from slot machines and realized if you sometimes see nothing and you sometimes see a lot, it's much more compulsive to come back. And so, like, a lot of what I'm arguing is this idea that you have to use the phone all the time. That's not fundamental to the technology. That was essentially engineered by a small number of companies because they had to get those revenue numbers up before their IPOs.
Now, are we talking about the phone itself, the internet being bad, or just the social media element of it?
It's the social media element, but not even the social media element. It's the engineered social media experience that gets you to look at the phone all the time. And I try to separate those things. I mean, I think the internet's great. I think smartphones are a miracle. I think the ability to connect with people online is a huge innovation. The thing that gets me upset is how a small number of companies took that good behavior and used it as the foundation to get us to do this all day long.
So we're like addicted. So how do you declutter?
Yes, the digital declutter.
Yeah, digital declutter. It's like Marie Kondo. I didn't know anything about Marie Kondo. Now I know a lot about Marie Kondo after people were telling me about this decluttering your closet. I guess it's the same thing with your phone.
I need to do that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Well, here's the idea, right? Essentially, I worked with about 1,600 people last year. And we went through this thing. It worked really well. And, you know, what I had them do and what seemed to work is I said, step away from everything for a month. Like, everything you could step away from where it's not going to cause trouble. You know, don't go on your social media, no video games, don't look at the news online. Step away for a month, get some space. When you're done with that month, rebuild what you're doing in your digital life from scratch, except at this time, say, what do I really need? And then when you add it to your life, say, how am I going to use it? So you clean out the sort of haphazard pile of various apps and services that you've sort of just downloaded and signed up for, you know, over the years that you use somewhat randomly. You clear that all out and you rebuild it from scratch. But this time you rebuild it. This is what I really want to do, and here's how I want to use it. So you're getting the value, but you're not getting taken for a ride.
You got several steps for the digital declutter. What do you think the most important one is? Because I want them to go read his books. I don't want to give them all of them. But what do you think the most important one is?
Well, you know, it kind of depends on who's doing it. But when younger people are doing the declutter, really the hardest thing about it for them is what do they do without the screen? So actually taking that time when you don't have the screen to look at during the declutter and putting in some real effort at figuring out what do I want to do instead? Like, how do I actually want to spend my time? That's really crucial. So the people who did it, who actually experimented and reflected and thought hard about what do I really want to do with my time, they succeeded afterwards in sort of really rebuilding their digital lives. The people who just tried to white knuckle it, said, I just want to break, I just want to detox, I just want to get away from it for a little while, they really had a hard time staying away, and they fell back into what they were doing.
You said a lot of people couldn't even do the 30-day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard. We don't know the degree to which like this is an escape, right? I mean, every moment that you feel a little bit bored, you look at the screen. When something hard's happening in your life and you want to deal with it, like you look at the screen. When the demons come out, right? Instead of actually grappling with those demons, you say, "Let me just do a little bit more scrolling." It's a really big escape for a lot of people, but that has its consequences.
I also think we don't understand how big, to a degree, how much of an addiction it is, because human beings love validation.
Like, God forbid you leave your phone at home for the day by accident. People feel like they cannot function.
Yeah.
Because I do that all the time by accident.
But for me, it's more than just social media. Like, for instance, on the drive-in, I use Waze every morning. That shows me if the police are out. Like, it's more than just social media. And for me, and I know a lot of people, even I make it my kids, this is kind of like a library for me. You know, back in the day, you'd have to go to the library to look up things and to pull stuff from encyclopedias. But for now, if I do get to a point where I'm waiting, let's say I'm waiting at a doctor's office or waiting somewhere, I open up my phone and I look at things that are my hobby. I look at cars. I look at vacations. I look at destination points.
Well, Kyle doesn't think social media is bad. You just think we should use it as a tool. That sounds like you're using it as a tool, right?
Yeah, well, this was the main argument I used to get from the sort of the social media companies, right, is they want to mix everything together. So I say I'm unhappy with this fact that you re-engineered your product to try to get me to look at 150 times a day. And they say, what, you don't think we should use smartphones? You don't think we should use Waze or something like this? They wanted to mix the whole thing together. That sort of what they were doing and engineering the experience to be addictive was somehow just the same as the internet in general. And if you push back on that, you were pushing back on the whole enterprise. But I'm a computer scientist, right? I'm a computer guy. I'm a tech guy. I think the modern smartphone is a miracle. I think Google Maps or Waze, like this is a miracle. I think Google, right? The ability to Google things, that's actually like a profound step. I think long form podcasting is actually having a sort of a massive innovation. It's giving people about an hour back per day, being able to listen to interesting content. That's all important. The thing that gets me is the fact that doing this all the time is not at all fundamental to any of those values, right? And that's what I'm trying to get people away from. It's just the sort of the mindless pulling this out as a way to sort of escape everything else. And what's happening is, it's not that this is bad when you're doing it. It's the fact that when you do it all the time, it keeps you away from the things you know are more important.
Right.
When you look at your screen time, sometimes it looks crazy.
But that's all you got to do. Look at your screen time, and you'll realize you're not looking at stuff that is actually of value most of the time. Most of the time, it's just social media.
Yeah, and Apple, this is smart. Apple added that screen time. Because if you think about it, Apple is not directly wrapped up in the attention economy, right? I mean, they sell the devices, but they don't have, the products don't make money the more you use it. Android, their competitor, Android's owned by Google. And Google's deep in the attention economy. They make money off of getting your attention, and that's his competitor. So Apple says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start adding tools to the Apple products that are going to get you off your phone more. You know what that is that's just actually like a really smart competitive move, because Android can't do that. I mean, their whole business is built around.
It's based on you going online and
they want you to look at things.
And
Apple,
they are trying to be more responsible about people using their phones. I feel like, and it was in a response, right, to people complaining about people being so addicted to their phones.
Yeah, well, Apple had some of its major investors push back and say, you got to do something about it. They're looking at teenagers that are looking at these things all the time. Teenagers are getting mental health problems. The activist investors told Apple, like, hey, you got to do something about this.
Right.
Yeah, they
Be
listen.
Responsible.
Yeah.
Now, I talk to kids all the time, and I was talking to these young girls at a high school the other day, and we were discussing social media and how they use it and how difficult it is for them to not respond to certain things. Like, and different girls are getting up and speaking. One of them was like, look, I go on there, I post something, and then people say mean things, or somebody says something about one of my friends, and I have to jump in and defend my friend. How do we get kids out of this mindset where they feel like they have to be on social media all the time? They have to respond to criticism. They're mean to each other. What can be done about something like that?
Well, I mean, I think this is actually a really big problem. Now, the research literature on this is still a little bit early, so it could go a couple different directions, but it looks like the research literature is trending towards a place that's making it pretty clear that social media for the teenage brain is a really bad mix from a mental health perspective, from a health perspective. And so my prediction is I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say 5 years from now, the idea that you would let a teenager use social media, we're going to think about that like we think about smoking. Right?
Yes.
That the teenage brain was too susceptible to nicotine. So we figured out, okay, you don't want teenagers to smoke because it's developing in a certain way where the nicotine hits it really, really strong. I think we're going to see that with teenagers and social media, that once this was re-engineered to play off of these psychological vulnerabilities against to look at it all the time, you combine that with the adolescent brain. And the mix is explosive. And we see these trends. It's really, really distressing. You look at mental health disorders, you look at hospitalizations for self-harm or suicide attempts, you look at it by birth year, right? As soon as you get to the kids who are born late enough to have smartphones and social media starting in their early adolescence, it's right off the chart.
You talk
shoots
about
right up.
that in the Spend Time Alone chapter a lot.
Yeah.
Like you say these kids need, you call it solitude deprivation?
Yeah.
Break that down.
Yeah. So what happens if you never give yourself any time alone with your own thoughts? Just it's you and your thoughts. You're bored. You're looking at the world around you, but you're not looking at input that was created by another person. Well, young people have pushed that experiment to the extreme, because if you want to find a group of people who never have any time alone with your thoughts, it's really like the teenagers with their phones, right? They're on it constantly. And we see the anxiety really jump up for that particular generation. So I think that's the canary in the coal mine that's telling us when you start banishing time alone with your thoughts, short circuits the brain. And so what happens is you get anxious. And I think as a culture, we have this background hum of anxiety that we've just become used to. Like, yeah, you just kind of always feel a little bit anxious. But a lot of this is really just we're short-circuiting the brain, because this brain was not meant to be processing input from other people all day long, right? I mean, this is not what our brain evolved for. So it's crossing some wires in there. So we're all a little bit frazzled. We're all a little bit anxious. And we don't realize it's probably self-imposed.
Now, what age do you suggest that kids start getting on social media, I guess, or start using their smartphones?
I would say 18.
18?
Yeah, I'm alone. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but
I've always said that I'm
that's
very grateful that I didn't grow up in the age of social media. It allowed me to really live my life, make the mistakes that I needed to make without people critiquing me, not do some foolish things that I might have done if I had social media at an early age.
18 seems a lot older.
I take my daughter's phone. Only time I let my daughter have her phone is when she's at cheerleading practice or something like that. Around the house, no way, Jose.
yeah,
How old you doing?
Weekends, 10.
10.
Imagine the type of
Makes sense.
pictures we might have posted, the controversial things you might have said that never ever go away.
Yeah, and the social backstabbing. But it was already complicated enough when you're a teenager to sort
Right.
of to
Imagine throw
navigate
that
what's
in.
going on with the friend groups and where you stand, and you throw in the internet. And yeah, well, I say 18 mainly because I don't use social media too.
Oh, so you don't use social media
yeah.
at all?
So to me, I'm saying, hey, make it 25, we're probably okay, right?
So you don't use social media at all? You have no Twitter, no Instagram, no Facebook, no...
I'm the only one. I've never had an account.
Really?
Never had an account. I'm the only one. I'm 35 years old. All this stuff was around. I'm an author. Never had a social media account.
And managed to write how many books because of
Yeah, because of it, probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
6. Yeah.
And the reason is because you feel like it's not necessarily good for the brain.
So it's good for the brain. And so I got to watch this happen from afar. So I never signed up for social media. And so I could watch the transformation. So social media was around, right? We're talking 2007, 2008, 2009. This is like early Facebook, right? It's around. People are using it. I didn't use it, but it wasn't a big deal. This was something you kind of occasionally used. And I watched the transformation around 2010, 2011, 2012, where suddenly people were looking at it all the time on the phone. And that changed overnight. So I got to see that from afar. That changed when they did the great re-engineering. But I'll say, when I ran these 1,600 people through that digital declutter, probably about half said, okay, I don't need social media. But the other half did. They said, I got things I needed for, really important things I need social media for. But of that half that still use social media, 98% of them took it off the phone.
Yes.
That's the move. Yeah, they
only
take it
got
off.
IG.
And that works. Yeah, see, that's Instagram's genius, is because it uses the camera, so it's hard to get off the phone.
Yeah.
But most of them, you take it off the phone, and what you're doing is you're taking the power away from the companies, because all that energy to make this something that's addictive, that's put into the app. So now if you're using it because, whatever, you're posting some things, you're connecting with people, whatever, you use it for the reasons you use it, you're not doing this on your phone, they don't have the hooks in your brain anymore.
Now, you're married. Does your wife have IG? Is she on social media?
She's on social media, yeah. I don't know if she has Instagram. It's a good question.
A house divided. A house divided, Cal. How much longer is that going to last?
Yeah, how long? Yeah.
But think about it. People go out together.
You're gonna unfollow her.
They go on dates. You go out to eat with a group of your friends, and everyone's on their phone. People go to concerts,
That's true.
and they're on their phone, and they're not even watching the concert. They're
It's all blue
using
screens.
the phone so
Yeah.
they can show people where it is that they've been,
Yeah.
or show where their seats were, and all of those things.
Yeah, or I give talks about not using social media. Everyone's posted it on social
Everyone
media.
I love what you said in the Spend Time Alone chapter, going back to the mental health aspect of it. You said seemingly overnight, the number of students seeking mental health counseling massively expanded. And people started developing something that used to be rare, which was anxiety. And so you asked, what caused the anxiety and anxiety-related disorders, and she replied without hesitation, smartphones.
Yeah. Well, this was the head of mental health at a major university. This was years ago, but I was talking to her about phones, and she's like, it was overnight. She's like, yeah, we had, we run the mental health service for the university. We have people coming in for all the normal things that, 18, 19, 20-year-olds come in for. You have a whole mix of things. And she's like, just changed overnight. And it was 4 times the number of people that used to come in. It's all anxiety-related disorders. They rarely saw that.
What from the smartphone causes the anxiety, though?
Well, there's a couple different things going on. So from like a neurological perspective, you have just the solitude deprivation, right? Mm-hmm. And so the way our brain has evolved is that it takes listening to another person or processing input from another person, it takes that really seriously, right? Because that was key to our survival. We've learned that if someone's talking to me, there's a lot going on. Like a lot of my brain is at work. It's kind of exhausting, right? I got to model what you're doing. I got to try to simulate your mental state. And so if you put yourself constantly in a state of processing input from other minds, your brain doesn't know that you don't have to pay too much attention to this one. This is just like an Instagram post. It doesn't know that. So it's using a lot of resources. It exhausts it, makes you anxious to always be doing that. And then you have the actual what happens on social media. And so one of the reasons why anxiety gets particularly high for teenagers is that you have a lot of this sort of back and forth subtle social manipulation that's going on social media. It takes some sort of bad tendencies we all have at the teenage years and it amplifies it up by a factor of 10. So you put those two things together, and especially for young people, so the brain's short-circuiting. All I'm ever doing is process information. It's desperate for a break, gets anxious. And then what you're actually looking at is playing with your emotions and your sense of sociality in such a way that you feel worried or upset, or why don't people like me, or people are getting at you, backstabbing you on there. Put those together, it's like a recipe for anxiety going to blow up.
You know, the crazy thing about social media is I'm thinking now, can I get off of social media fully, right? And I'm like, a majority is fear of missing out, right? And the reason I say that is because as a kid or as a young adult, you would watch the news and you would get everything that you need on the news. But now it's like something happens so fast and so much. Like there has to be tons of stuff that you missed that you have no idea what's going on because you're not on social media. Where do you get that information from?
You can get that information other places though too.
Yeah. Well, look, so I was talking to like a really well-known journalist recently. He was telling me about all journalists are addicted to Twitter. They all hate it. They all feel obligated, like they have to be on it. Mm-hmm. So this guy's the editor of a large publication, and he was telling me, he's like, this idea. He's like, I have this idea in my brain that I'm going to miss news, right? And this is his job,
correct?
Right? I'm going to miss news, and he's like, here's been my experience. What he told me was, I don't think I would be better off probably if I just waited till the next morning to see like how it shook out and what's the story that got written, right? Like get the paper or something like this. Because it's all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's all over the place. Half of it's wrong, half of it's takes, right? So it takes a little while to shake that up and figure out the real story. There's people who do it and they're called reporters. He's like, I think I would be better off if I just got out of this and just looked at the paper the next morning or something. Give it 6 hours to shake loose and see.
You don't have to be the first one.
You don't have to be the
news.
first one.
But also, I think it's who you follow. Right. You also have to think about who is on your timeline feeding you information. And if there's certain things that you feel like, okay, I need to know what's going on. I need to follow at MSNBC. I need to follow CNN. Instead of following a whole lot of people that have nonsense posted, maybe for what it is that you do, you just make sure you carefully curate the list.
But that nonsense gives you the information first,
But those people are barely right, too.
Yeah, I know.
Because nobody cares about being right. They just want to be first. So you see all these breaking news headlines, and then everybody on social media forms their opinions about them, but you don't know what's real and what's not.
Exactly.
Or what's accurate and what's not accurate.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm like a premature old man. I know that, but like, I read a paper newspaper. I read a paper newspaper in the morning. I think I know what's going on. Yeah. I mean, I don't get the breaking news. It's true, but I read it the next morning. Mm-hmm. Some things I miss, I guess, but this whole idea that we need to be up to speed on things. I mean, this is like 6 years old. Yeah. That's what's crazy about all this. It's not like we're talking about, okay, this has been in the fabric of our culture for the last 3 generations, and now we're trying to do something different. This is, okay, 6 years ago we were fine.
Absolutely.
And we didn't know about the break-in. I mean, it's so quickly we changed our expectations, we change our behavior. So the minimalist response, that's why I call this book Digital Minimalism. The idea of minimalism is to say, don't worry so much about what you're missing out on. What you should be concerned about, the minimalist philosophy, is not spending enough time on the things you already know for sure are really important. No. Right? It's I'm missing some hours I could have been putting on these things that are key, right? Professionally or my social life or whatever. I don't want to take time away from these things that I know really move the needle to seek out other things I might be missing. And so that's like the minimalism, maximalism shift. You go from I'm afraid of missing out to I'm afraid of not spending enough times on the things I already know for sure are working for me.
I love what you talked about with the effects of social media on friendship. And you talk about consolidate texting. And you said phones have become woven into a fraught sense of obligation in a friendship. Being a friend means being on call, tethered to your phone, ready to be attentive online.
It's true. I mean, it's all the time, right? And then your friends, family, like, why aren't you answering the text? right? All the texts are going on.
Or they do the question mark, like hello and you're like, I stepped away from my phone for 10 minutes. Relax.
Yeah, it's been 5 minutes. Yeah. Well, here's one of the things again we know is that social connections are sort of at the center of human flourishing, right? Like social connections are so crucial that like our social system is connected to our pain centers, right? That we actually, the same center that makes us feel physical pain comes into play when we feel isolated or lonely, right? So it's really important. So how do you best, satisfy that drive for social connection? Well, if you're sacrificing time and attention on behalf of a relationship, so it's like I went to where you are. I'm giving up some of my time. I'm making a sacrifice for you to come to you. We're going to do something together. I'm showing you a commitment. I'm actually sort of making some sacrifice for you. Those type of connections are really strong. We feel really good about it. And when you replace it with what psychologists call social stacking, which is the stuff that requires almost no sacrifice of time and attention, I just hit like on your thing or dropped a comment or sent you a quick text, it doesn't give you the same satisfaction. And so we get this sort of paradoxical results in the research literature where people who use social media more end up lonelier. And the reason is because they think what they're doing on here, it feels like this is being social, but the sort of deep social centers in our brain really want you to be sacrificing on, with someone. I took time out of my day. I'm sitting down with you. I'm talking with you face to face. That's what it's craving. So if you replace that with the easier stuff, you end up paradoxically lonelier because there's this deep part of your brain that doesn't know about text messages. It doesn't know about Instagram that says, well, we haven't been social today at all.
I was going to say this one girl got mad because it was her birthday, right? So I just put up like a picture and a post like, happy birthday. And she was mad I didn't write a long, deep message. And she was like, after everything that we've been through together, I can't believe all you did was post
Who's that?
happy birthday. I'm not going to say right now, but
that's
she was furious. And I'm like, are you serious right now? You wanted me to like post something long and you feel like our friendship isn't valid because my post wasn't long enough?
Yeah, post was skimpy.
See, I wanted you to elaborate on that. Like being a friend and a friend thinks, you didn't post this or you didn't like this.
Right. You didn't like my picture. How come you didn't say congratulations? Or people send you things like, hey, can you post this and post this picture of me and say this about me?
But see, these are the issues you expect are going to occur when you take something that's hundreds of thousands of years old, right? This carefully evolved sense of sociality. And then you start really messing around with it. With ideas that teenagers came up with in dorm rooms, right? We throw this new technology in the mix. Say, let's completely change the way that we socialize and connect with people. Like, of course, that's going to cause problems. Just like when we started screwing around with the food in the mid 20th century, it started coming up with this processed fast food, the stuff that was so good, right? But it was not at all what we had evolved to expect. What happened, right? I mean, everyone got unhealthy. So same thing. We take another incredibly strong drive, which is we have to be connected to people. Half our brain's dedicated to this, and then we just start screwing with it. Like, well, what if we send back like icons? What if we talk to people with text that show up? What if we send pictures and all of this? I mean, some of it's going to cause good. A lot of it's also going to cause bad because we're taking something incredibly powerful and then we're just kind of screwing around with it.
How do we reclaim conversation?
So the way I see it is, what your brain counts as true socialization is in person or analog, right? I hear your voice. You hear my voice. We're going back and forth. If I could see you, it's even better. If I could see body language, if we could actually have you in a context, that's what I call conversation. That's what our brain treats as real socializing. And so the way I see it is the phone, the great advantage of the phone for socializing is logistics, right? It makes it much easier to find out, hey, where are you? Across the street, let's meet up. I'm over here. Or you're in town. I see on social media, like you're visiting. Great, let's get together, right? It's great for logistics. But you shouldn't think about it as replacing this, right? And so if you change your mindset, so you're like, when I'm actually analog or face-to-face with someone, that's socializing. This is logistics. It's not bad, but it's just logistics. It doesn't count. Then that's going to get you doing more of this. And as far as I could tell from sort of my research or the other research literature, it makes you a lot happier, right? I mean, you got to be sacrificing time and attention on behalf of family, close friends, and community. You do those things, you feel like a part of something, you feel very social. If you're not doing those things, you don't, no matter how much you're, saying happy birthday under someone's Facebook post.
You know what? Well, what about, some people would say, how do you write a book or talk about some of the things when you don't necessarily have it or live through it? Like, that's like somebody saying, how do you write a book if you don't have any about kids and you don't have any children? Or how do you write an advice book and you're not in a relationship? So somebody might say to you, well, how do you write a book on social media, but you don't have a social media and you never had one?
Yeah. Well, so the way I see it is I'm like an anthropologist, right? I've been on the outside. I think that's my advantage, right? I'm one of the few people who can actually look at this from the
You can see how stupid people
with
look.
a little bit of objectivity. Yeah. So I've been studying and writing about this for years and years. I mean, I started really writing about social media maybe back 5 or 6 years ago. And so I've been observing this sort of like a scientist. And so we need all the perspective. Obviously, we need, like most people use social media, they could give us that insider perspective, but we got to have at least one person out there, right, who's looking at it from the outside.
Do we look like zombies and aliens when we look at us? Like, how do we look?
I told my daughter, I said at our cheerleading competition, I said, I want you just to look around at all your teammates and just see how stupid they look when you're all in a circle and everybody's just down on their phone having a conversation.
This is the thing I noticed, right? That was the thing I noticed was for the first years of the iPhone, what you just saw was everyone had the earbuds in because it was like a really good music player. Yeah, right. And it was really like 2010 to 2013, it came out of the pocket. The iPhone came out of the pocket. Everyone was looking at it. And so that's what I noticed is not using this, is when did that change? And that's what got me looking into it. I say, oh, why did it come out of the pocket? Because Facebook got serious about their revenue numbers, and they hired some serious people, and they said, how do we make this something that people will take out of their pocket? We can't have people just logging on to Facebook.com twice a week. We're not going to get 100x return for our investors. How do we get people to look at this thing all the time? And they changed it. And so that's the main thing I noticed from the outside is it went from earbuds. Everyone had earbuds. That's what I noticed, to the phone came out of the pocket.
It's like being a coach and you didn't play the sport, but you can study all the plays and be like, okay, this is what needs to happen in order for this to happen. Now, what about people who say our relationship isn't valid because you haven't posted me on social media? We hear that a lot. People being upset. My boyfriend won't post me. My girlfriend won't post me on social media. What's the problem? And they're both on there and he's posting other things but not posting his girlfriend. How would you respond to somebody that says that?
Oh yeah, with relationships, social media causes all sorts of issues. I was doing a talk earlier this week, and this young man was like, "Look, I don't use social media because whatever. I've read your books. It's like I'm having a hard time with my dates because they think, what are you hiding?
Right, something's fishy here.
Yeah, why can't I see what's going on? Something's fishy here. Same thing as someone else I know was doing an interview with earlier this week. It's the same idea. He now doesn't bring his phone with him, right? Because he doesn't want to be with the distraction. But now his girls always say, like, why don't you have your phone? You're worried that someone else, your other girl's going to call. There's got to be something else going on. So, so that's complicated. But I step back and that's just one of the many complications that you could expect when, again, you start messing around with things like how we connect. So I got to tell you, it's a lot easier not to have it. For me, at least, right?
You get caught up. Somebody DMs somebody, and
it's like,
next thing you know, you see somebody you went to school with.
It's a lot of mental cycles.
Yeah,
it's a lot of mental cycles. Yeah.
How do you identify somebody who's addicted to digital distractions, as you call them?
So, I mean, what you're looking for, and so I talked to some psychologists about this. I asked, like, are people addicted to their phones? What's the right terminology? And so what they told me is, okay, it's not like a substance addiction, right? And so with some rare exceptions that really show up more in video gaming. People's relationships with their phone is not like a substance addiction. What they would call it is something more like what they call a moderate behavioral addiction, which means, hey, if I took your phone away, you're not going to sneak out in the middle of the night, right, to get to an internet cafe or something, right? It's like a substance addiction. You're not going to steal your grandmother's jewelry or something, right? But with a moderate behavioral addiction, what it's described by is if you have access to it, you use it more than is healthy. Right. And so that's the way that psychologists think about what's going on. And so the question is, the question to ask if you want to determine if you have one of these behavioral addictions to the phone is, do you find yourself using it even when you know that you'd be better off not? Do you find yourself using it when you're with your kids? Do you know it'd be much better just to be here with my kids? Do you find yourself using it you're with your friends and you can't help but get the phone out, or you know you should be sleepy but you can't help but look at it? So are you using it even when you know you shouldn't? Are you using it more than you know is healthy? That's the hallmark of what they call moderate behavioral addiction.
It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is look at my phone.
Yeah.
Before you pray?
Yeah, it is, because I wake up, because my alarm's on my phone too. Jesus. So in order for me to turn my alarm off, I have to look at my phone, and then I'm like, okay, did anybody text me? Did anybody call me?
Yeah.
And then
I don't touch my phone until at least an hour after I wake up. I get up, I pray, I read my daily affirmations. I get in the car, I ride. I really don't even touch it till I get like 5:30 when I'm about to be at work.
Yeah, there's a lot of entrepreneurs now who are running this hack they call the monk mode morning. Where the idea is you say, okay, I'm accessible online starting at 10 or 11 or whatever it is, right? And I'm not going to see my phone, I'm not going to see the internet until whatever it's 10 o'clock or 11. It's really simple rule. So everyone in their company, everyone in their orbit kind of understands, like, okay, I can't reach you until starting at like 10 or 11 or something like this. And so it's an easy rule to understand. And what they get out of it, though, is that they wake up and they get going and they get after it and they get 4 or 5 hours, like every morning undistracted. And then they transfer over to the life where they're much more connected. And the people who are pulling this hack are getting a lot done. Because that means they get this whole morning of they're focusing on the hard things, like moving the needle on the things that they're trying to do that are difficult. Mm-hmm. And so I'm starting to see that. The other hack that some of my readers were telling me was watches and alarm clocks.
Yeah, my alarm is on my phone.
Yeah, an alarm clock. You don't need it next to your bed. And a watch. So this is what I learned from a lot of my readers. It's I need to see what time it is. Now you pulled out the phone to see what time it is, and there's the notifications. And so these simple hacks, but like this thing and then an alarm clock. It's a big difference.
You have a chapter called Don't Click Like.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't we click like? I never click like.
Yeah, the like button is such a contrivance. I mean, the issue with the like button had nothing to do with the point of social media. Like the point of social media was Web 1.0 was all about e-commerce. It was like big companies. It was an easier way for them to sell you things or get you their content. And we had Web 2.0 came along. It's like now everyone could actually contribute, right? This was Web 2.0. That's what like early social media was. Like I could post things about myself. My friends could see what I'm doing. I could post remember MySpace? Like I could post my music. People could rake it in their list. Like, and that was great. None of that required the sort of the like buttons or the favorites or the auto tags. It was all contrived because there wasn't enough of a stream of rewards coming to get people to look at their phone all the time. So the like button is not at all fundamental. And so, yeah, when I talk about like, don't use the like button, don't use the favorites. Ignore the photo tags or the dislike button. I mean, that's what those buttons are about. The way I see it is like when you're hitting those buttons, it's like you're clocking in for your job at the data factory to make some more money for the social media companies, right?
And then they have these ads, right? They know exactly what you're looking at. So you could be, say, shopping for something, and the next thing you know, ads start popping up on your phone for the exact thing that you were looking for. Like when I was buying a house, all these mortgage ads just kept coming up on my phone.
I mean, the like button was a boon for these companies, right? So now it gave you a reason to keep checking. And two, you're just, as far as they're concerned, you hitting like or dislike on all these things, it's like you're sitting at the computer terminal filling out consumer surveys. Let me tell you what I like. Let me tell you what I don't. That's why I think of it as like clocking in at the Facebook data factory. Like I gotta go do my shift. You know, I gotta earn Mark Zuckerberg. You know, he gets my paycheck today. Let me sit down and do all this data for it. And so in that chapter, what I'm saying is like if you want to interact with people, use social media or texting. Think about it more from when you use it for social purposes. Think about it more logistical. Hey, you're in town. Let's get together. Like, okay, I'm across the street. Whatever. Gotcha. But don't think about this as socializing. This is just you're making sure that the stockholders of Facebook get their dividend this year. Yeah.
So with that said, you talk about reclaiming leisure in the book. Give them a couple of tips on how to reclaim the leisure.
Yeah. So that's the hard part about all this, right? So I walk people through this. Redo your digital life, get back down to what matters, get some rules around how you use it. Now they have all this time free. That's actually really problematic because it's not at all obvious what do you do if like the average American uses social media something like 2 hours a day. Like, what do you do with those 2 hours? Mm-hmm. It's actually a kind of a hard question. And a lot of people that did this experiment in the book had a hard time with it.
Read this book. Is one thing you could do.
You could read. You could read the book, right? But that's only going to take you so many hours, right? And so in the book, I actually get into, what are the things we crave as humans? So a lot of this book is about like what do we actually crave as humans, and what are the ways that some of this tech has maybe diverted that, right? And how do we get back to the things we crave? Because what we want to do is we want to be happy, we want to be satisfied, we want to be successful. And so one of the things we crave is really high quality activities. So things we do or participate in that are skilled, that maybe require some appreciation, that we enjoy just for the sake of the quality of the thing, right? Like this is something I do or something I listen to, but something I'm an expert on, I appreciate, and I just like it for its intrinsic quality, right? We need that because life is hard, it has all these ups and downs, but if you could just appreciate certain things, like this is just really good and I appreciate this, a high quality activity, it helps buffer us from a lot of that. And so the book talks about you need to get more of that back in your life. When you take 2 hours a day of swiping out of your life, try to fill some of that 2 hours with something that's like an activity that's high quality, something that you're good at, something that requires skill, something that you're getting better at, something where you can really appreciate. And when you do that, you feel this shift in how you feel. Like that background anxiety really starts to dissipate, and you have more of a calmness or a peace when you start replacing more of the frenetic tapping at the little glowing screen with, I spend an hour today or 2 hours today doing something that means something to me. right? Or it's really important, or it's a skill that I've been building, or it's just really quality, or it's something I just really enjoyed.
Like learning how to cook better.
Learn how to cook better, yeah.
I have a billion cookbooks at home that I don't use.
That's a great example. Like learning how to cook, or like it's athletic, right? You're like, I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, how many people do you know now who do that these days, right? I'm going to go learn like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but they get so much out of it because it's like a couple hours of I'm doing something that's hard and I can appreciate
Learn how to put
it.
up some drywall so I don't have to pay all that money to hire somebody else.
Figure out how to do electricity for the lights. Yeah, yeah.
So how do people get in contact with you now? Because it's definitely not on social media. So how can somebody get in contact with you?
You don't need to get in contact with him. Get in contact with his work.
Yeah.
Where you going to be at if they want to hear you speak? How do they know? How do they get this information?
Well, I do have a website, calnewport.com.
Okay.
Yeah, because he's not against websites.
I didn't say
like
you're
not
Minimalism.
I'm a nerd. Come on.
There's pros and cons to technology, is all you're saying.
And we gotta just be a little bit more careful about. Yeah. You start to get intentional about. I wanna care about what the pros are. I want to avoid the cons. It looks a lot different than what a lot of us are doing today. You get a lot out of the tech without getting taken for a ride. That's the whole idea.
Well, give them the website again.
calnewport.com.
And we appreciate you for joining us, man.
Digital Minimalism, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. I've read it twice this year. It's amazing. Go get it.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. It's Cal Newport. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.